Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are diving into a truth that so many people feel, but very few know how to understand. A truth that hides behind cold messages, emotional distance, mixed signals, and confusing behavior. A truth that has broken many hearts, not because love is absent, but because fear is present. When an avoidant pulls away right when the connection deepens, it is one of the clearest, yet most misunderstood signs that they feel something powerful for you. To most people, distance means disinterest. To an avoidant, distance means emotional overload. The moment they start feeling closer, more connected, more attached, or more vulnerable than they plan to be, their fear system activates. They are not pulling away because they don't care. They are pulling away because the feelings are becoming too real, too intense, too threatening to the fragile emotional structure they've built to protect themselves since childhood. Avoidants learned early in life that closeness brings pain. They were taught, not through words, but through experience, that dependence leads to hurt, vulnerability leads to rejection, and emotional need is dangerous. So their entire nervous system is wired to treat intimacy as a threat. When someone they actually love gets close, their body reacts as if they're losing control. Their mind starts racing. Their fear whispers, if you let this person in, they will leave you. If you let yourself love them, they will hurt you. If you allow closeness, you will lose yourself. This internal panic grows stronger the deeper the bond becomes. When the relationship reaches emotional intensity, the kind an empath brings effortlessly, the avoidant begins to feel exposed, unguarded, seen, and nothing terrifies an avoidant more than being emotionally seen. Because being seen means being touchable, and being touchable means being breakable. So instead of leaning into love, they retreat. They pull back to regain emotional balance. They distance themselves to regulate their inner fear. They withdraw to silence the vulnerability you awakened in them. This is why they can be warm one day and cold the next. Why their eyes can look full of softness in one moment and empty in the next. Why conversations can feel intimate one night and non-existent the next morning. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't scare them. You didn't push too hard. You didn't ruin the connection. What frightened them was not you. It was the feeling of how deeply they were beginning to care. For an avoidant, love doesn't feel like comfort in the beginning. It feels like danger. It feels like someone is getting too close to the parts of them they've kept guarded for years. They fear losing autonomy. They fear emotional dependency. They fear disappointing you. They fear not being enough. They fear being left after investing. So instead of embracing love, they step back to protect themselves. Ironically, the stronger their feelings get, the more their fear intensifies. And the more their fear intensifies, the more distance they create. This is where people misunderstand them. Most assume the avoidant pulling away means the connection wasn't real. But the truth is the opposite. Avoidants remain calm around people they don't care about. They stay consistent and unbothered with people who don't matter to them. There is no emotional threat, no vulnerability, no danger. Those relationships feel safe because they don't activate the avoidance emotional system. But you activated it. You reached a depth in them that many people never do. You stirred a feeling that challenged their emotional walls. You touched the part of them they hide from the world. And that is why they pulled away. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. It wasn't apathy. It was overwhelm. It wasn't lack of interest. It was the exact opposite. Their distance is the emotional smoke alarm going off, warning them that you matter more than they intended, that the relationship has moved past what they can control, that their heart is becoming invested. And when they sense themselves caring too much, they withdraw to regain the distance that makes them feel safe. This behavior confuses the empath because, for an empath, love creates closeness. For an avoidant, love threatens safety. But beneath the avoidance fear, the truth remains, they pull away not because they don't love, but because they do. The retreat signals the depth of their feeling. The distance is the disguise their fear wears. And if you ever felt them withdraw, just as the connection deepened, understand this. They were not running from you. They were running from the intensity of their own love. When an avoidant physically withdraws, but remains emotionally connected, It is one of the most powerful and misunderstood signs that they still love you. Their silence may confuse you. Their distance may break your heart. Their behavior may look cold and different or dismissive. But inside them, something very different is happening, something they will never say out loud and may not even fully understand themselves. Avoidants detach in actions, not in emotions. Their body leaves before their heart does. Their messages stop before their feelings do. Their behavior shuts down long before their attachment fades. This is because avoidants are conditioned to retreat when emotions intensify. They feel safer pulling away than leaning in, safer disappearing than confronting what they feel, safer observing from a distance than engaging up close. But here's the truth: emotional bonds don't disappear just because avoidants run from them. In fact, the running often proves the bond exists. When an avoidant loves you, they stay connected in the shadows. They watch your stories. They reread old messages. They revisit your photos. They recall moments that meant something to them, even when they pretended they didn't. They replay conversations long after you've forgotten them. They think about reaching out, but freeze at the last moment. They wonder what you're doing, who with, whether you've moved on. They may not talk to you, but mentally and emotionally they haven't left. Their withdrawal is not a sign of losing interest. It is evidence of emotional overwhelm. Avoidants do not know how to manage closeness, so when feelings grow, they respond with distance. It's the only way they know how to regulate themselves. They are not withdrawing because they want someone else. They are withdrawing because your presence makes them feel something they were never taught to handle. And that emotional intensity lingers long after the physical connection breaks. Even when they try to cut the cord, their mind refuses to follow. They feel a quiet pull toward you. They remember how you made them feel, understood, valued, accepted. They miss the emotional safety you gave them even though they never acknowledged it. Despite their silence, they feel connected to you in ways they cannot explain. They sense your energy. They react to your shifts. They notice your absence. They feel your distance. They are tied to you emotionally, even if they distance themselves physically. Avoidants typically struggle with emotional self-awareness, so they might not say, "I miss you," or "I still care." Instead, it shows through restlessness, irritability, sudden sadness, or unexplained longing. They may distract themselves with work, hobbies, dating apps, or other people, but none of it fills the void you left. They pretend they're fine because vulnerability terrifies them. They hide their feelings because admitting them feels like losing control. They maintain physical distance because closeness makes them feel exposed. But inside, they are still bonded to you. And this emotional connection doesn't fade quickly for an avoidant. They might appear detached in person, but internally, they revisit the relationship over and over. They ask themselves why they pulled away. They analyze what went wrong. They feel guilty for hurting you. They wonder if they made a mistake. They feel a quiet ache, one they suppress so deeply they struggle to identify it as love. You may think they've forgotten you, but avoidants don't forget the people they love. They store them in a protected emotional room inside their mind, a place they rarely visit but never delete. This is why they often resurface unexpectedly, reaching out after months or even years. It's not random. It's not impulse. It's not coincidence. It's the emotional connection pulling them back, even after time and distance. Your absence doesn't erase the bond. It intensifies it. They feel the contrast of losing your emotional presence. They miss the softness you brought into their world. They miss the safety of being with someone who didn't demand more than they could give. They miss the moments where they felt seen, even when they pretended they didn't need it. So when an avoidant withdraws physically, but stays emotionally connected, it means they love you. Deeply, silently, and fearfully. Their body may run, but their heart lingers. Their actions may disappear, but their emotions remain. They stay tied to you, not because they choose to, but because the bond you built reached deeper than their fear could erase. When an avoidant shows you a sudden moment of vulnerability, and then immediately shuts down, it is one of the strongest signs that they feel something real for you. Avoidants do not open up by accident. They do not slip emotionally with just anyone. They do not reveal softness unless something inside them is powerful enough to push past their lifelong defenses. So when they express affection, share something personal, look at you with unguarded emotion, or admit a fear, a longing, or a truth, even briefly, understand that this moment is not small. It is not random. It is not meaningless. It is a glimpse into a heart that is terrified of being seen. Avoidants grew up in environments where vulnerability was unsafe, ignored, punished, or dismissed. They learned early that showing emotion leads to pain. So they built emotional walls for survival. They built distance to self-protect. They built identities around independence and control. And because they've lived inside that emotional armor for so long, vulnerability now feels like a danger signal. It feels like losing control. It feels like risk. So when love starts to melt the edges of their defenses, it creates an internal conflict. Their heart wants to open, but their fear wants to run. This is why their vulnerability shows up in flashes. They might tell you something deeply personal. A story from childhood, an insecurity, a hope they never share, or an emotional confession. They might open up about their stress, their fears, their regrets. They might let you see their tenderness through a soft tone, a long gaze, or a moment where they let their guard drop. These openings are rare, and they feel like breakthroughs. In that moment, you see the person underneath the avoidance, the one who's capable of love, longing, connection, and emotional truth. But then it happens, the shutdown. They may suddenly grow quiet, distant, confused, irritated, or emotionally unavailable. They may act like nothing happened. They may even pull away physically or emotionally. It feels like whiplash. But the shutdown is not rejection, it's recoil. When they reveal something vulnerable, it triggers an alarm inside them. They panic because they feel exposed. They feel emotionally naked, and that terrifies them. Vulnerability is wired into their nervous system as danger, so their body reacts automatically. Retreat, withdraw, close off, shut down. And while this shutdown hurts you, it hurts them too. They aren't shutting down because they regret showing vulnerability. They shut down because they're overwhelmed by what it means. The moment they open up to you, they feel the gravity of the connection. They feel how much you matter. They feel the emotional intimacy forming. And for avoidance, intimacy activates their deepest fear. If I let them in, they will eventually leave. If I care too much, the heartbreak will destroy me. So instead of leaning into those feelings, they retreat to reestablish emotional safety. Their shutdown is an attempt to regain control over the intensity of their emotions. But what they don't realize is that this pattern is exactly what reveals their love. If they didn't care about you, vulnerability would never appear. They wouldn't feel exposed. There would be nothing to protect themselves from. The emotional opening followed by quick retreat is a sign of internal conflict. And love is at the center of that conflict. These flashes of vulnerability happen because you reach parts of them no one else does. You make them feel safe enough to open, even if only for a second. You touch the emotional places they've kept hidden. And as much as that scares them, it also pulls them toward you. That push-pull dynamic isn't manipulation. It's a reflection of how deeply they feel. They want connection, but they fear closeness. They want you, but they fear the vulnerability required to have you. They long for love, but they fear the loss that love exposes them to. When an avoidant shows vulnerability and then shuts down, it means the connection has reached a they can't deny. Their heart is trying to open, and their fear is trying to shut it down. The shutdown isn't because they don't care. It's because they care so much that their emotional system can't handle the intensity. That brief moment of softness is their truth. The shutdown is their trauma, and the conflict between the two is the clearest sign that love is present, even if they don't yet know how to let it stay. When an avoidant comes back after distance, it is not because they are bored, lonely, or looking for a casual emotional refill. It is because they feel a type of safety with you that they cannot find anywhere else. Avoidants do not return to situations that felt overwhelming. They do not revisit people who made them feel pressured. They do not come back to relationships that felt unsafe. They return only to the people who touched something real inside them, something familiar, something soothing. something that made their nervous system relax in a way they rarely experience. Their return is not about convenience, it is about connection. And the deeper that connection was, the more likely they are to circle back, even after weeks, months, or years. Avoidants often struggle to recognize their own emotional needs. They tell themselves they don't need anyone. They convince themselves they prefer independence. They believe they are better alone. This belief protects them from the vulnerability of attachment. But when they meet someone who emotionally safe, someone who listens without judgment, who communicates without attacking, who understands without demanding, it awakens a part of them that they usually keep buried. That sense of emotional safety becomes a quiet anchor inside them. They might not acknowledge it, they might not understand it, but they feel it. And when they distance themselves and move away, that feeling of safety becomes the thing they miss. Their returns often confuse people because they seem so casual. A short message, a story reaction, a random check-in, something subtle that doesn't match the emotional intensity you felt. But the reason their approach is subtle is because returning terrifies them. They fear being vulnerable. They fear rejection. They fear being asked to explain their disappearance. They fear being confronted with their feelings. So they come back in the smallest way possible, testing the waters to see if the door is still open. Behind that tiny message is a storm of emotion they don't know how to voice. Avoidants don't return to everyone. And they especially don't return to people who trigger their fear. They return to the person who made them feel the most regulated, the most understood, the most valued, the most accepted. They return to the person who didn't force them to be someone they're not. They return to the person who made love feel less like a threat and more like a possibility. The truth is, avoidants attach deeply, but silently. They store emotional bonds inside them in ways they do not express externally. Even when they shut down the relationship, the emotional imprint remains. And when they feel lonely, overwhelmed, or unbalanced in other parts of their life, their mind goes back to the place where they once felt grounded. You. Their return is a sign that they were never indifferent. If they didn't love you, the distance would stay permanent. Avoidants cut off people they don't care about with ease. When they don't feel a connection, they disappear completely without hesitation or guilt. The fact that they come back means the bond mattered. It means your presence touched them in ways they couldn't articulate at the time. It means you represented comfort in a world that often feels unsafe to them. Love for an avoidant does not move in straight lines. It moves in circles. It spirals. It retreats and returns. It expands and collapses. And the return, no matter how small, is always a sign of emotional significance. Their coming back is not weakness or indecision. It is their way of saying, I felt something with you I can't find anywhere else. Because avoidants are not drawn to intensity. They are drawn to safety. They gravitate toward people who soothe their nervous system. They stay attached to people who make emotional intimacy less frightening. They circle back to the one person who allowed them to feel loved without feeling trapped. They don't return for attention. They return for comfort. They don't return for validation. They return for connection. They don't return because they have nowhere else to go. They return because there is nowhere else that feels like you. And beneath their quiet re-entry, beneath their cautious attempt to reconnect, is a truth they will rarely admit. Coming back to you is the closest they ever get to admitting they still love you. Avoidants spend their entire lives pretending they don't care. It's their armor, their shield, their emotional survival strategy. They act indifferent because they were taught early, through abandonment, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, that caring deeply leads to pain. So they learn to numb, detach, suppress, and minimize their feelings. They built their personality around self-protection. They repeat phrases like, I'm fine, it doesn't matter, and I don't need anyone, not because those words are true, but because those words keep them safe. But underneath all of that emotional distance, avoidants have one terrifying truth. They work desperately to hide. They care far more than they show, and they are terrified of losing the person who comes closest to seeing their real heart. When you come into their life and make them feel understood, valued, safe, and emotionally seen in a way they never experienced before. You awaken a part of them they didn't even know still existed. They start to care. They start to attach. They start to feel warmth where they used to feel numbness. But instead of welcoming those feelings, avoidance panic. Caring about someone makes them feel out of control. Needing someone makes them feel weak. Loving someone makes them feel exposed. Their fear whispers, if you love them, you could lose them. If you let them in, they could hurt you. If you depend on them, they could leave. So they hide their feelings instead of expressing them. They distance instead of drawing closer. They pretend not to care because caring feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like danger. But make no mistake, an avoidant who acts like they don't care usually cares the most. The indifference is a mask. The silence is a defense mechanism. The emotional distance is self-protection. And the clearest sign of their hidden love is the fear they feel when they sense they might lose you. They notice when your energy shifts. They feel it when you stop reaching out. They sense it when your heart begins pulling away. Even if they don't respond, they feel the panic internally. Avoidants are hyper-attuned to emotional withdrawal because it mirrors their original wound. The moment they felt emotionally abandoned as children. When you start detaching, something deep inside them activates. They won't say it. They won't show it. They might even act colder. But inside, their fear rises like a tidal wave. They replay conversations, wondering where things changed. They think about the connection more often than they admit. They check on you silently, through social media, through friends, through old messages. They wonder if someone else is giving you the comfort they couldn't. They wonder if you're moving on. They wonder if they pushed too hard for too long. This fear doesn't always bring them closer. Sometimes it paralyzes them. Avoidants often freeze when they sense they're losing the person they love. Their mind says reach out, but their fear says stay silent. Their heart says fight for it, but their trauma says don't risk being hurt. This emotional gridlock is why avoidants appear unmoved on the outside, but are deeply unsettled inside. The fear of losing you tears through their defenses and forces them to confront feelings they've avoided for years. They care more than they admit because you represent something rare for them: emotional safety. They don't bond easily. They don't attach often. Their love is not scattered or impulsive. So when they fall quietly but deeply. That is why losing you scares them so much. You are not just another relationship to them. You are the person who saw their raw edges and didn't run. You are the person who soothed their anxieties without knowing it. You are the person whose presence made their world feel less threatening and more alive. Avoidants fear losing the person they love because losing you means losing the emotional safety they never found anywhere else. It means losing the healing you brought into their life. It means losing the version of themselves they only experienced with you. The softer, more open, more human version they hide from the world. And the reason they pretend not to care is because acknowledging their fear of losing you would how deeply they actually feel. So when an avoidant appears indifferent, distant, or unaffected, don't mistake that for the truth. Their biggest sign of love is the silent panic they experience when you detach. Their greatest confession is the fear they bury. They still love you, not through words or gestures, but through the emotions they fight hardest to hide. The strongest sign that an avoidant still loves you is not in what they say, nor in what they show. It is in what they feel when you finally pull back. Avoidants spend most of their lives believing they don't need anyone, that distance keeps them safe, that emotional independence is the only way to avoid getting hurt. They convince themselves they can walk away from connection without consequences. They believe if they withdraw first, they can never be abandoned. But all of that changes the moment you detach, because your detachment is the one thing they are emotionally unprepared for. It is the one shift they cannot rationalize away. It is the one loss that confronts them with a truth they have avoided their entire life. That they bond deeply, even when they pretend not to. When you pull away, something inside them shatters quietly. On the outside, they look composed, calm, even indifferent. But internally, they panic in silence. Avoidants don't panic the way anxious individuals do. They don't chase. They don't confess. They don't reach out immediately. Instead, they freeze. It feels like the ground beneath them is shifting, but they don't know how to respond without exposing their fear. And that fear runs deep, rooted in old wounds that taught them connection is dangerous, but losing connection is unbearable. So instead of acting on their feelings, they turn inward, trying to control the rising anxiety. Your silence forces them to feel emotions they've spent years numbing. It forces them to confront the reality that they care deeply, intensely, and painfully. They start noticing everything: your absence in their routine, the missing comfort your messages used to bring, the quiet where your voice once was. They feel the void you left even if they pretend not to. They may check your social media compulsively, looking for signs that you're okay or signs that you're moving on. They replay old conversations, searching for where things shifted. They read your messages again, not for nostalgia but for reassurance. They hunger for the connection they once feared. This internal chaos is not just longing, it is fear, the specific fear of losing someone irreplaceable. Avoidants don't fear losing everyone. They fear losing the one person who made them feel safe enough to open up, even in small ways. They fear losing the rare emotional security you gave them. They fear losing the acceptance they never admit they crave. They fear losing the comfort they found only with you. Your detachment awakens a feeling inside them they have no language for. A combination of regret, longing, and panic. They are terrified that your silence means you finally realized your worth. That you finally understood they couldn't meet you where you needed them to. That you finally stopped waiting. That you're no longer theirs, even in spirit. And that terrifies them more than intimacy ever did. Their biggest secret is that your absence hurts them more than your closeness ever did. Closeness overwhelms them, but distance breaks them. They don't know how to hold on to you without feeling exposed, and they don't know how to lose you without feeling destroyed. Your detachment places them in emotional limbo where their greatest fear, being abandoned, becomes real, not imagined. And what makes it worse is that they know, deep inside, that they played a role in creating this distance, that they pushed you away, that they misunderstood your intentions, that they mistook your love for pressure and your devotion for danger, that they shut down the one connection that felt meaningful. But because avoidants are not skilled at communicating or processing emotion, they internalize all of this silently. They don't share their fear. They don't ask for reassurance. They don't tell you they're hurting. They suffer in quiet turmoil, trying to stay composed, while their heart battles between longing and terror. This is why the panic they feel is such a powerful sign of love. Because avoidants only panic when someone has touched their heart in ways they can't explain or control. When you detach, it becomes clear to them that losing you is not just losing a relationship. It's losing emotional safety, losing their chance at connection, losing the one person who saw past their walls. Your detachment is the moment their fear becomes truth, and that truth becomes the proof of their love. They finally realize that you weren't just someone they dated. You were someone who mattered deeply, and the panic they feel is not weakness. It is love, raw and unfiltered, finally showing itself in the only way their attachment system allows.